What's the story, guys? Welcome to another episode of What Happens Here, Las Vegas's newest sports and entertainment program. I'm Marcus Deegan, your host. Thanks for dropping in again for a mad week of insane interviews with some really interesting people. Thanks very much for joining us, guys. We really do appreciate the support from all over the world that we've got on this podcast. Got to let you know we have a massive competition coming up. It's a trip for you and one of your mates to come and hang out with us here in Las Vegas. We are keeping up with some really interesting interviews this week. You know, when I did this podcast, I wanted to have people on that were inspirational, that were interesting, and that had a great story. So far, every guest that we've had has been that, and this guy is no exception to the rule. He has got so many different job descriptions that I don't even know where to start. I mean, he's been a hairdresser, a glam rocker. He's been a mixed martial artist fighting out of Canada. You may have seen him do the UFC breakdowns on UFC Fight Pass. He's worked for TSN Canada. He's got the no bullshit analysis approach is what I like to see. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome to What Happens Here, Mr. Robin Black. What's the story, Robin?
Man, thank you. It's good hanging with you.
Good to see
you're
you.
in Vegas. I'm in Canada, a couple hours outside of Toronto. I wish I was down there right now. I love Vegas. I mean, right now, of course, it's a completely different thing. But Vegas is a very special place, man.
Yeah, do you get to Las Vegas a lot just for fun, or is it always work?
A bit of both. I can't remember the last couple of fights I've done there, but I've covered a lot for TSN and down there when I've been doing different things for the UFC at different times. It's very much the home. And I flew down to meet with Dana White the first time. And yeah, I get there a lot. And then usually, like say after McGregor's last fight in Vegas, my wife came down, we stayed for 5 or 6 days. So often I can make them both, come down, cover fights. And you say work, you said, is it for work? I do work, but it's also like the greatest thing ever. Like work to me is not about, it's not work. It's just my life. It's my passion. It's what I love to do. So they all blend into each other, work, play, life. It's all the same to me.
It's like Wayne Newton said, if you really love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And I truly believe that.
My wife will tell you that on Tuesday, I worked from 8:30 in the morning until 9:30 at night. That's what she'll say because we were quarantined together. But I'll tell you, I didn't work at all that day. I just did cool stuff. Like I did cool things. I talked to people about fighting. I made videos about fighting. I analyzed fights. I chatted with fighters about their fights. I studied martial arts. I did a little reading about things connected to something about how the body works or how the brain works or how we learn or something. And I just study fighting and talk about it. Like, it's not a job. Like, it really isn't. And if it is, the fact that I get paid for it is just absurd to me, but amazing.
So your knowledge of this business is really intricate. You know so much about it. You can talk about it to anyone on any subject. Is that from years and years of doing repetitive interviews and analysis, or is it from being a mixed martial artist yourself?
Well, thank you for saying that. There's a lot of ingredients. Like I take what I do very seriously. I was going to say my job, but we just said that it isn't really a job. I'm really deeply, eternally curious about fighting, about combat, about martial arts, about all of it. And so I'm continually studying it forever. And in the act of studying it, I want to develop mastery in what I do. I want to understand martial arts on a level. There's a lot of like sort of intrinsic rewards that happen from doing that. You get these eureka moments, you learn something, you become fitter, you feel the reward of doing something, getting better at something that you truly believe in. That's like, I'm intrinsically motivated by it. So I just do it. And the more you do it, you get better. I don't know that the interviews and the chats and stuff themselves is as big of a part of the process as the stuff not in front of the camera. I think that's the most important. So in the gym, being taught, studying, reading, researching, and when I see anything that I don't understand, and I'll do this forever because I always won't understand. That's the beauty of studying something, anything, dedicating your life to studying anything, is you know that no matter how much you might know today, that might look like a lot compared to what you knew 5 years ago, it's next to nothing compared to what is possible to be known. And as long as you remember that and you know that that's true, you'll keep learning. So I get to a point, I'm like, this happened. I understand what a feint is and it does. Well, why does it happen? Okay, well, he's making the other guy believe he has, you use metaphor, he has certain cards in his hand, but he's lying about his bluff. Okay, well, that means that. But what's actually happening in the brain? Oh, okay, now I have to learn about neurology. Now I have to learn about how the brain works. What works? What are the chemicals? You just keep going, keep going, keep going. And if you do that long enough with anything, you get entirely new plateaus where you break through and understand things in a different way. There's a metaphor I saw once about a guy who was like, I don't know what's the highest level in the Army or Navy? Do you know, like
A colonel.
admiral, colonel, admiral, whatever, colonel. So it was an interview with somebody who was a Navy colonel, and they were like, it's amazing you started out in the engine room of a ship. And he said, it's just all the same thing. He wanted to really understand his job, so he had to really understand engines. So then to really understand the engine, he had to understand the whole ship. And then to really make sense of the ship, he had to understand the Navy. And that's just how it goes.
Right.
And so,
yep.
yeah.
I mean, that's kind of with life as it is, the more you learn, the more experience that you get. And the fact that you've had all these, like I said before, job status that you have, it's incorporated to where you are right now in your life, as far as you're a fighter, you've been in the music industry, all of a sudden you're talking to people, you're getting articulate, your vocabulary is growing, you're learning, which puts you into a position that you're in today, working for the UFC, working for Bellator, being on TV, being well known. And if you don't know who this guy is, you're on the fucking moon. You and Joe Rogan have got a pretty good relationship. I've seen you on his program a couple of times. I really enjoy listening to him as much as I enjoy listening to you. And it's because of, like, as you said, the knowledge and being able to articulate things in a way that dummies like me may be able to understand. What's your relationship like with Joe these days? Are you guys still good buddies?
Yeah. Joe's, oh man, he's such a good dude. People see a lot of things about Joe Rogan. They see him do his job. They see him like do comedy. They see his podcast, but he's like really generous and he's really curious. You know what I mean? And he's really like, he's a real fucking good dude. Like he really is. And I feel really lucky that I made, that guy's my friend,
Yeah.
I texted him today because he's got Elon Musk on his show.
I saw that.
Dude, Elon Musk. But I had dinner with him when he was in Toronto. Him, me, Anik, and one of his buddies, his name's escaping me, one of his comedian buddies. Oh man, I feel terrible. The name, a little dude who's like, does a show about killing, I forget. It'll come to me all of a sudden while we're chatting. I'm embarrassed. I can't think of his name. He's a great comedian. We had dinner and like half of our conversation, we ate steaks, of course. And half of our conversation was about Elon Musk. I was like, dude, what's that guy like? And he's like, he's just a dude. Like he just wanted to hang out, because think about it is, and that's also why Joe's so interesting. And it's something you've done 16 times. You're going to do 1,600 more. Every time you talk to somebody, I think on some level, you just get a little bit of their perspective. So when you have 1,600 people like Elon Musk and, some of the most interesting people, comedians and fighters and great performers of things and bow hunters and all these people, you get a little bit of their insight. You get a little connection into how other people think. And a lot of the people you end up talking to, that's why I love studying martial artists. That's why I love studying world champions.
Right.
Now we're starting to study and see high performing people. Really, people who are like living their shit, like doing exactly what they were meant to do, and when you're around those people a lot, it all kind of adds up. But yeah, Joe's a wonderful guy. And you mentioned, as you were mentioning stuff, that I work for the UFC. I actually don't work for the UFC. I work for TSN, which is a broadcast partner. So much like Chael Sonnen and I have similar kind of structures. He works for Bellator, the company, and he works for ESPN, the broadcast partner. I work for also Bellator. I was doing a Bellator thing right after this, so I have the t-shirt, although I wear these all the time now. Like
representing.
I don't know. And they sent me a bunch, and now I like them. Now they feel, so I wear them a lot. But and I work for TSN, the broadcast partner. I don't work for the UFC, although at different times I have done some amount. And most often it's Dana who said, hey, get Robin Black for this thing. And Joe literally, speaking of Joe Rogan, he literally took a bunch of my stuff and sent it to Dana and said, you should really look at this guy.
Wow.
That's what I was saying the first time I was in Vegas. That's a fucking generous thing to do, right? I try to do things like that now because I know how good it feels. Like to have somebody go to bat for you. And he did it again when they were, I don't have a good relationship with a lot of the people that work there for whatever reason, much other than Dana. Much of it's probably my personality. I don't like structure. I don't do very well with it. I don't do very well in corporate environments. These are some of my weaknesses. So I don't always have the best relationship with the people that work in that company, either below Dana or in different levels. I just haven't clicked with them. But Joe recommended me. Dana said, got one of his vice presidents or one of the key guys to call me, and he said, yeah, we'd like to bring you on. I met with Dana after a 45-minute meeting where we're like standing up and acting out things. Dana was like, you're going to be on, we're moving you and your wife to LA, and you're going to be on UFC Tonight. And then we're going to use you in all our pre and post shows. Welcome aboard. Hey, introduce him to Lorenzo. I went down. They said, you'll have a contract in 4 days. And that was 6 years ago, and I do not have a contract. And so the structure of that hasn't always been great. And then at some other point in that process, and this is not a judgment, it's just how life works. Somewhere in there, someone's like, I don't like that guy's style, or it's the way I send emails, or the way I handle, bosses or whatever. It's part of some of my weaknesses. They weren't even considering me for the Contender Series at the time. And Joe then again went to them and said, dude, you should really be seriously considering Robin Black to commentate the Contender Series. That's the kind of guy Joe Rogan is. Now, had any of that worked, I would be in a different place in my life. And honest to God, I can't imagine being happier than I am right now. Because that didn't quite click, and I'm as much to blame about the fit as the UFC is, because it didn't quite click. I ended up going to Southeast Asia and commentating the art of Let Way, and I started going to England and commentating bare knuckle boxing. I started working for Bellator, where I just fucking love the people there. All of that, you don't know where the road will go a lot of the time in your career, and where you think it's going, often you're just making that up in your mind. I thought that by this point I would be sitting next to Joe Rogan and John Anik doing that job. And that's very much not what I'm doing. And I'm very happy where I am. But the path unfolds, and you don't know where it's going to go. But if you end up somewhere happy, you're thankful for the way it went, because you ended up somewhere that you're feeling happy and fulfilled.
Well, this is when when I found out that we had the opportunity to have you on the show, I was like, I've just got to talk to this guy, because this guy knows his shit. I want to try and absorb some of what he does. I want to learn. I want to listen to him talk. I want to talk to him face to face. And everything has a silver lining. Like you said, you don't know where things are going to go. I didn't know in this pandemic that I was going to be doing a podcast and interviewing you for So I understand what you mean. Now, you did mention Asia. You spent a bit of time in Singapore. And you're working for, is it the One Championship over there?
Well, I looked at that.
The One FC,
that was another one. So essentially, this chapter of my life, which is, it feels perfect, to the point that I'm nervous something will change. But I know also change is inevitable, and that's part of life. Literally right now, I'm at a point where I love working for the company Bellator. I love covering the UFC for TSN. I go to Southeast Asia. Let Way is the art of 9 limbs, 1,000-year-old bare-knuckle Burmese martial art that includes headbutts, sumo, all of these things. I've got just a nice menu of stuff to be able to do. But to get to today, the big key turning point was 3 years ago. I worked at a 24-hour combat sports channel in Canada. It was called Fight Network. And we were way ahead on making digital content around martial arts. We were doing really well. But, weird changes in structure and how, people perceive their future and stuff, They literally cut our department. When that happened, one, I just immediately was like, this is what I do. This is what I was put on earth to do. I have to find, if I have to innovate my way through this, I have to. But I also started to become somewhat selective to figure out where I was going to really grow into. I was going to try to get better every day, study my craft, study the moving parts around my craft, and then figure out where I would end up. And among the exploration was One Championship, which is in Singapore. So One Championship is, to people here, they would say it's like the UFC of Asia.
Right.
but its identity is very different. It's very different. It is very driven by positive concepts. Like it's very, their goal is to be sort of inspiring and to see those elements of martial arts that are present, you know, courage and overcoming challenges, and kind of have the fighters personify that. And that's how it's presented. So I love that. I love that. And I find Chatri, who is the boss, very fascinating individual, very successful and interesting. And he's a martial artist. So he flew me over to Singapore to like a good 7 or 8 days, stayed in a beautiful hotel. Their offices are nice, and Singapore is incredible. And I explored it, and I explored it very seriously. You know, tried to imagine living there, and it is a wonderful culture and beautiful, man. And it's the future. Like you're in Singapore and you're like, oh my God, we live in like prehistoric times. Like everything is so advanced, and like it's really amazing. But it didn't quite click. Like it didn't quite click. The things they stand for are the things I stand for. So that was a part of it. But I knew, like, I'm a 16-hour a day guy on something that I love, that I'm pouring my whole passion into, that it's like, it's more than cage fighting to me. It's the study of all things through studying martial arts. And if I was going to dedicate 3, 4, 5 years of my life to something and really start to move away from like all of the different things I study and commentate and analyze, and really focus it on one company, that fit's got to be perfect. And ultimately, and you know, we have, and Chatri and I seem to get along very well, and I do like what he's doing, and I always keep an eye there, and I always sort of like keep an open mind that fit might come together. But the Bellator fit just happened by itself. Right. Whereas I was ramming heads trying to figure out how to like work within the organizational structure of the UFC, and it felt hard. And in Singapore, I felt hesitant, and I really wasn't like jumping, like, we're doing this immediately, you know, let's do it at all costs. And then Bellator, I started working for them or covering them through DAZN. DAZN is a streaming app that has sports.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. And so I started working for DAZN covering Bellator, and I just wanted to be around these people more. I wanted to be around, they're super creative, and they're big. Bellator is a big company, but it's smaller than some of the other bigger companies. And the smaller the company, the more innovation is probable, right? This isn't a fighting conversation.
Right, no, absolutely.
Now we can go to anything. We can go to, like, you know, your podcast versus NBC Sports. Who can innovate? You can, because you can do whatever the fuck you want.
Right.
Tomorrow you can you can do anything, right? But you go to NBC Sports or ESPN or whatever. Same thing, Coca-Cola versus a guy or Budweiser versus a guy who's making craft beer. Who's going to innovate? The craft beer is going to innovate, right? So all of a sudden I'm surrounded by Bellator people. And the part that was difficult for me, even in kind of the explorative connections I had with the UFC, was their corporate structure. This doesn't make sense for me. It's like, that's just not how creators work. And again, that's not a criticism, whether it's them or ESPN or the Oscars or bigger things. They want you to do a role. Here's your role. We'd like you to do here, wear this, stand there. When it goes to you, say something about this. That's not me either. Whereas at Bellator, they're like, hey, you got a weird idea, you want to try it? Yeah, let's totally try it. And it, you know, and so it suits me really well. And it's the first time, and I've been there for a few months now, and a year with DAZN where I was working there. It's the first time where the fit just feels natural. The fit feels natural. And I didn't realize, I like to think about life and think about life as part of your art, and your path as part of the art that you're creating. I didn't realize how important fit was. And I also didn't realize how kind of fringy my thinking was. Right. I didn't realize I'd be the weird guy in a corporate structure.
Right.
I mean, I shouldn't be surprised, but it did kind of surprise me, you know, that I'm a bit of an outsider, renegade, kind of like, you know, do things my own way guy. And that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. What you don't want to do then is fit yourself into a very structured corporate world that likes to execute on formulas and expect a particular role. You're a bad fit. I'm a bad fit for that. So at Bellator, I got like this many people that are kind of involved in stuff I'm doing, and they're like, yeah, that sounds like a cool idea. Why don't you work with this other creative guy, Billy, and this creative guy, Kaim, and Nancy, this smart, and you guys go do something cool.
Right.
Like
right.
you don't get that at Budweiser. You know what I mean? You can't get that in a big corporation. So it's been good. That aspect has been good. And I still get to, I love the UFC and I love the fights, and I still get to cover them for the broadcast partner up here in Canada. So I'm pretty lucky, man.
So it's pretty much what the underline of what you're saying there is that your uncorporate self, it kind of worked out for you in the long run, because you stuck to who you were. You stayed with what you believed in your style, and look where you are today. So that says a lot. Always stick to your guns and stick to who you are. Don't be someone else just because a huge corporate company wants you to wear a tie and say this and that. Look what this guy's done. He's done exactly what he was intending to do, and he stayed true to himself. And that's why so many people like you, Robin, is because you're true to yourself, mate. There's no bullshit, and people can see through the bullshit a lot of the times. And obviously the way that you talk and your knowledge is second to none. So that's why people love it. So you did mention Asia.
I will add that you mentioned Joe, and Joe is a friend, but he's a mentor, whether he will want to be one or not.
Absolutely.
And he is the guy who has built a world saying, this is what I do, and I think I can do it better by just doing it the way that's honest and real, rather than having it be all the corners smoothed off of it and being more like others.
I love that.
He is the man of that. He is and so that helped a great deal too, getting to know Joe and seeing that. And then once you know somebody and you watch them work with some connection to their personality and, and a friendship with them, that helped a lot. It helped me sort of carve my path a lot more.
So is Joe Rogan pretty much the same kind of guy off camera that he is when you're talking on the podcast?
Yeah, he is. He really is.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm trying to think if there's any difference. There really isn't. Like, at least if you know him, like I've done his podcast maybe 3 times, and the Fight Companion once with Brendan, and who's a good dude too. And talking to Joe for the 20 minutes before and the 10 minutes after was no different. There's not much difference. I can't think of anything. If anything, he's actually kind of even kinder and more open-minded off camera,
right?
If that's possible.
Nice.
Yeah. No, he's the dude. I live in a nice house out here, and that connection to kind of go and mine that route where he recommended me to Dana didn't work out really in the long run. I ended up somewhere that's a better fit in the long run, but it still helped pay for this house that I live in, and that's what a guy did for his friend, and that's that's a big thing. It's a really big thing.
It's called sharing the wealth and being humble and helping out your mates. When you can, you know what I mean? What sort of what sort of a person would you be if you made it to the top and then you can't help out your mates that are a little bit down below? So listen, how about this in the news this week? Mike Tyson has been offered $1 million by the bare knuckle fighting championships. What do you think about that one, Robin? Do you think that Mike's too old to come out of retirement?
Yeah. So I heard 20 million. I heard he was offered 20 million.
Wow.
So I met Mike Tyson, and we hung out with him for like 40 minutes. Have you ever seen a clip? So I'm going to tell you this story first before I think about Mike fighting. Have you ever seen a clip where a guy sits down with Mike Tyson and he says something like, a convicted sex offender? And
yes,
Mike
I have seen that.
You've seen that? He was going to kill that guy, right? That was about 45 minutes after we hung out with Mike. And so me, John Ram Dean. John Ramdeen is one of the great lovers of fighting in the world and a brilliant broadcast partner. He and I sat down, and I think John Pollock as well, with Mike. And we chatted with him for like 20 minutes on the air. And it was people we loved him, right? We are fight fans. Like we are like, a friend of mine came in. Her name is Sandy Seguris. She fought for a world title at 135 as a woman. She was a training partner of mine. Her nickname's Little Tyson. And her coach like idolized or really looks up to Cus D'Amato. And I brought them down. And so he was surrounded by people who love him.
Yeah.
and admire him and appreciate him. We were all taking. He didn't want to leave. He didn't want to
Wow.
leave. He
Wow.
hung out and just at this fight channel, and he hung out and he was smiling and he was like just having a wonderful time. And 45 minutes later, that asshole says that to him. And I know those things are connected. It isn't just because that guy said that. It's because he was surrounded by people who loved him and treated him great and were like, he was so welcomed and it was so warm. And I know that is part of why he wanted to kill that guy.
Well, my stomach dropped when that host asked him. Well, didn't ask him the question. He stated it in his intro. I just thought that was just incredibly no class at all. But it's funny that you talked about Mike. I saw his show here in Vegas a couple of times. I want to show you this picture right here. This is quite a funny story. So if you look at this picture, where are we going?
Yeah.
The reason why me and Mike are laughing so much is my beautiful fiance, just before we took the picture, she said, "Oh my God, you stink like weed." And me and him just cracked up laughing. So that was a really cool story, man. But I heard Tyson Fury's dad wants to fight him.
Tyson Fury's dad.
Have you seen that?
That sounds fun. Yeah, I've seen bits and pieces. That sounds fun. So my first take is, man, I'd love to see Mike Tyson fight. My second take is he was so warm and it seemed like there's something about him that there's been tragedy in his life and there's been negativity and, he's gone through some shit and he would tell you he's been a bad person and different things. And you cheer for him a little, at least I do.
Absolutely.
And so part of you is like, oh man, wouldn't it be wicked? I'd love to see Mike do that. But then the functional aspect of fighting to me and about getting knocked out and age and all of that stuff. This is my belief. We live in a free society. If you're educated and you know exactly what you're doing and you want to do something, go do it. Mm-hmm. Our opinion, he's too old, he got hit. Anytime I hear that or people see a guy lose a fight, they're like, he should retire. I'm like, who the fuck are you to say that about another human being's life? I'm someone who believes people can achieve anything they dedicate themselves to. And if you can't quite achieve it, but you dedicated yourself, you got somewhere real special in the journey, right? And I believe that's at the root of how I see the world.
I totally agree.
Yeah,
100%.
So,
and you know what? And us being selfish fight fans, I remember that feeling that I used to get knowing that Mike Tyson fight was on this weekend. And then can you imagine if they're like, Tyson's fighting in January or whatever, that you get that same feeling of like, oh my God, Mike Tyson is about to fight. I was obsessed and I have been.
Me too.
Yeah.
So
can we jump in just a little bit? Because I had a couple of fans wanted me to ask about the music. Do you still play? Do you still sing? What are you into these days?
I don't play. I played one show with my friends it's probably 5 years ago now. We did one, and I will do one again if and when the time happens that, I'm not traveling for a chunk of time and everybody's around. We're like, can we get 6 rehearsals in and then do a show at one of our favorite Toronto places as a thing? I would do that again, and I hope that happens at some point. But, honestly, I'm not a good singer, right? I never was. I was a good performer. I loved doing it. My wife is a professional singer, and she was in musical theater, and she's like a 99th percentile quality singer. All the other people in musical theater, when they work with her, they're like, oh, cool, Erica's about to sing. Like, she's a badass. So it really kind of lets you see the reality of where you are. To me, I look at that period, and we were reasonably successful. We traveled around the world, and we got to play the big shows. We had a lot of audience. People loved. We had a group of people, a few thousand, maybe 5 or 10,000 in the world that loved our band. And that to me is the great accomplishment.
That's awesome, bro.
Yeah, it was cool. But the lesson of it, along the way, I didn't become a better singer. I didn't train my voice. I didn't train the craft. I would be like, well, I can kick higher. I can wear cooler outfits. We can put on a bigger show. I can be a better frontman. I did everything but train the root skill. Right. And I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not sad about that. I'm appreciative of that because that reminded me later when I came in and I wanted to fight, and then now when I want to do this, that it all goes to really training the root skills, like looking for your weaknesses and don't run from them, accept them as a truth of where you are today, and use that and elevate that.
Yep.
It doesn't mean don't also build on your weaknesses or your strengths and embrace your strengths or whatever. But if there's some area that I'm not as good at and it matters to me and it's meaningful, I'll now work hard at it. So that was part of that path for me. Is, it's also what I do now is so much more rewarding to me, intrinsically rewarding, where like I feel good doing the things I do. I feel good getting better at the things I do. I feel good studying great martial artists, learning what I can from their process and seeing if I can apply it to my life or share it with other people who can apply it to theirs. Like, it's just so much more in it for me. I'm also better at this than I was that. Like I'm becoming pretty good at this.
Yeah.
And that's intrinsically rewarding. So for those reasons, and probably lots more, playing in a band, you just drink so much booze and you eat so much shitty food and drugs that you would never do as a normal person, you would say yes to in some weird bar in the UK, so there's a lifestyle element that's just not part of my life anymore.
Yeah.
So those, so no, but it's still a really neat thing. And if I'm being honest, I like having a weird story. It's neat. I feel if I was a little kid and somebody said, and when you hang out with a friend at 50 years old chatting with him in Las Vegas and you're talking about your life, you were a low-level rock star, you fought men in a cage, you travel around talking about fighting, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here. That is so cool. Like a little kid would just think it was the greatest.
Yeah, you tell people what you do in normal life and they're like, come on, this guy's got to be bullshitting, right? No, my fucking story is actually true. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So this weekend, man, we got a lot of big fights on. Cowboy Cerrone's fighting. We've got Henry Cejudo, Dominic Hughes. Man, and the main event, Ferguson, Justin Gaethje. I don't like to ask what people's picks are or how they think it's going to go down. You going to be watching the fights this weekend?
Yes. So I've been covering it for TSN up here in Canada on SportsCenter all week. So I've built a few, we call them essays where I'll write about and then use my voice to kind of describe it. And then Sam, who's a truly brilliant editor. He's young too. It's cool when you're around these people who are really good in these things. And he puts in imagery and then it ends up being kind of a storytelling, kind of like the opens that they use in the UFC, stuff like that. It's not a new device. I've used it in sports and entertainment all over, sort of a narrated storytelling. And so I did one about just how fighting is the kind of thing that can excite people and inspire people and how that's important. I did another on Donald Cerrone and how being from sort of an isolated from a ranch and, not having a crowd could be really interesting. Then we did a couple of chats and then Saturday night, I'll be watching all the fights. And then 1:30, 2 a.m. Toronto time, I'll go live into SportsCenter to analyze it. So I'm excited that these fights are on. I don't know how they're going to present it and talk about it. I know that there are meetings and discussions about things that should and shouldn't be discussed, which to me, the most interesting aspects of these fights are all the truth. These guys, some of them haven't been able to train like they're used to, but they're professional athletes and they're eager to go. Some of them have had really weird challenges all week long to be in. They've had to travel. They have the fears and the anxieties and all of those things. I think all of that is a bigger, how you've been training, how you've been preparing, how you handle all of these completely different. These guys are used to extreme structure. They get a printout or an email, both really, of what their week is going to look like.
Right.
And then their coaches and teams schedule in other things around it. And they're like, all right, this is Tuesday, this is Wednesday, none of that's happening now. Everything's different. They're quarantined. They're being tested. Whoever handles those things better, that aspect is much more important than who checks leg kicks well. Or who's got good takedown defenses, whatever. This is, to me, this is a rare and unique time to be able to analyze how professional martial artists handle variation and stress and the unknown and uncertainty. That shit's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. I actually just saw an interview, and it's funny that you bring up Cowboy Cerrone. I just saw an interview the other day. He was getting interviewed by Brett Okamoto, and he just said that prior to walking out for the biggest fight of his life that he just did not want to be there. Now, do you think that's a
Yeah.
guy that got crumbled a little bit under the pressure due to that he was fighting Conor? And do you think that that is going to be less pressure for him this weekend? Obviously, he's not fighting Conor, but he's not going to be in that big arena with all the fans. It's not like the most important fight of his life. Do you think that's going to make a huge difference for him this weekend?
I do. I mean, again, a lot of this, I'm always trying to change what it is we do, and by remembering that what we do isn't just what people have always done when we talk about a fight or baseball or music or whatever. Our job is to sort of, my belief is the job is to search for truth. And if we're searching for truth, there's not that much room for speculation. Speculation's fun and it engages people and it creates debates on Twitter. But if we're being honest, it is impossible to know.
Yeah.
But what we can discuss is that these things are real, right? How you perceive the situation is real. It affects how you perform. And and Donald has had some, it's so wild. It's such a gift to be able to see people like this. He's had 51 fucking fights. And yet he also is scared and he's nervous. And sometimes he's worried he doesn't get the best out of himself. And sometimes he can't quite get himself going. That's amazing. That's incredible. And his honesty. And this is a trend actually right now that I'm seeing heavy. Honesty. Like it just becomes easier because they hear their peers speak honestly or what. But fighters are saying, yeah, man, I'm fucking terrified before I go out. Or, yeah, the idea that I get double the pay is a pressure on my mind. Or, I know if I lose this one, I'll get cut. But if I worry about that, I'll be like, sharing these thoughts out loud is so valuable to us. Because if you realize that Donald Cerrone at fight number 51 is scared or anxious or nervous or like getting in his own way so he can't perform, then you don't feel like a weirdo when you're scared and nervous about shit in your life, right? You know what I mean?
And it's actually, as fight fans, we don't look at these guys like that. We don't look at them thinking, man, this guy's scared before he walks out into that octagon. But then when you hear they're actually, we look at them as being warriors and gladiators. But when you hear that kind of human side, that kind of emotional side, it kind of not only draws you closer to the fighter, in my opinion, but it makes you see them more on a human level than this big warrior gladiator type figure. That's awesome.
But they're also both. They're scared and they're a warrior. And then you make the connection. Wait, a warrior is somebody who feels fear and does it anyways, right? And all of a sudden, you really see it differently. I fought 9 times. It's fucking scary.
Yep.
It's heavy. You are afraid to get hurt, but that's way in the back of your mind.
Right.
The anxiety in retrospect is the fear and worry of humiliation, of failure, of being embarrassed, of not being, and you shouldn't feel that. It's sad that we all feel those things because by the time you get there, you've already had to do things that most people would never do so far. I've been talking to a lot of fighters lately, doing streams for Bellator, and sometimes we're watching their fights. Ben Henderson, I said, dude, you beat whatever the number is. Dude, you beat 30 other men or whatever his number is. He goes, yeah, but I lost 8 times. Like, how are you thinking about that? Like, but that's what drives these guys. And failure, like trying to avoid failure is a powerful, powerful pain. And then when you do lose, and when you lose in a particular way where you really failed, whatever that looks like for you, where you truly did, like, not, oh, he was the better man. It's like, I failed. It is humiliating. I have never cried as hard in my life as after a particular loss.
Wow.
And yeah, never. I mean, losing friends has never felt this pain that I couldn't explain. Wow. And it's not because you wanted to, and it's not because you chose to feel that. For some reason, that was in you. But when you come out on the other side of it, and then a few years go by, and you have the chance to examine it and think about it and stuff, you become a better person because that's what all of this kind of thing is about, pushing yourself and taking risks and trying and failing and putting yourself out there. That's what that's about. It's about being more than you are in the future.
It's so interesting to hear you say that. I'm really fascinated by that. And that just shows you that pain and loss also contributes to growth and learning and progression in life. And
Yeah.
I really respect that. Man, I wish I could sit here and talk to you for another fucking 2 hours, I swear to God, but I know you've got other things to do. Listen, mate, I was wondering, is there any advice you could give for a young, handsome, aspiring podcast man like myself? Is there anything you could say that maybe could help me in the direction where I want to go?
The first thing is you're really natural. I don't know. I don't like to use the word natural on things because most things are a result of work or experience or knowledge, but you seem naturally really good at this. Like you're very naturally engaged. You are actually curious. You're not, and we all still do it years later. You're not so busy thinking about the next thing or the next question or where this might go. You're in it. So fuck that, and that's probably, that takes a lot of people hundreds of podcasts, hours, thousands, but like all things, I really believe the main secret is just do it a lot. Like, and I kind of understood that myself. Like now I have platforms that, mean I actually don't really need to have a job if I didn't want one, or if I lost it or something changed dramatically. And that was never the plan. The plan was to get breakdowns in particular. That's my kind of main thing. I love to chat about other stuff, but going in and building these pieces of breakdowns, these pieces of art is my thing. And I just thought the only way I'm ever going to actually break through many plateaus and become good enough that it'll feel really meaningful to me and let me keep learning and growing is if I do thousands. And I had to do thousands. I've done I think 1,600 might be the number, but I'm not sure. I lost track somewhere. It could be 12 or 1,300. It could be more. I don't know. But I was like, I have to. Stephen King writes every day, like every day. He also goes on Twitter and yells shit at Trump every day. I noticed, but that's irrelevant. You just have to do it every day. But I didn't think if I make 1,000 breakdowns, this will give me a sort of a work structure. I thought if I do 1,000 breakdowns, I'll get good at it. But inherently doing a lot of something makes you better at it every day, makes you improve in all the things. You get better. Like there's a real natural vibe of what's happening here. The look of your thing is good, where the mic is, how you're sitting, everything seems really good. But where you'll be 600 podcasts from now, you'll presumably look back at this and go, wow, I was so not as good as I am today. That will happen by doing hundreds and then thousands of something. But other things happen too. All of a sudden your audience grows. All of a sudden you get better at all the weird other skills around it. All of a sudden you start to study the Navy instead of just the boat. I had a conversation with somebody in the Middle East the other day about fighting in United Arab Emirates. And I had stories I could tell him about going to Bahrain and commentating there. And I was like, how did that even happen? How do I know about fighting in the Middle East? It just happened by doing it.
Wow.
And so it's a shitty piece of it. It feels like a shitty piece of advice to say, just do what you're doing lots. Because it leaves out a lot of the other challenges of it. Like there's gonna be weeks or there could be a chunk of like 2 months where you're like, I'm doing it a lot. They're not taking off, or they take off less than I want, or our audience shrunk for 3 weeks, or there's a coronavirus and now the algorithms of the internet make this. Like there'll be lots of shitty setbacks in the process of it. But if you never deviate from the idea that if I do this a lot with the goal of getting better every single day at everything I do, all the little things, 1 or 0.5% at everything, I'll inevitably be really good and probably really successful. That truth is 100% there for almost everybody. But most people don't do it. And I think the root of it goes to, shit takes a lot of work. So you have to put in lots of work, which you won't do unless it's something you love, right? The only reason I'm good at or getting someone good at this or wherever I am on my road towards one day mastering my thing is because I do it a lot. And why do I do it a lot? Because I fucking love it.
Yeah.
So I do the thing I love, and then inherently with the idea, the eye on progression, you know, from studying martial arts helps that. You go from white belt to blue belt to purple belt, and that natural instinct that there's always more is a part of studying. You apply it to your job, or you apply it to your business, and it's the same philosophy. But as long as you love it, you'll keep doing it. And as long as you're doing it out of love, you'll keep getting better. So I wish I had better advice than you're really good at this, so do it a lot. That's the best I got.
You gave me goosebumps saying that, because I now know that this conversation with you, Robin, is going to be a progression of my journey. If I hadn't got to talk to you today, I wouldn't have learned the things that I've learned in this 10-minute conversation. So I want to thank you very much for that, brother. You've actually inspired me a lot, and pretty much everything that you've said is how I feel in my heart. Anyway, I love doing this. We've bumped out a bunch of great interviews. I've got a bunch of great ones to come. You so far have definitely been my favorite so far, only because I respect you and I look up to you as a mentor and someone that I aspire to be like. Robin, is there anything that you want to say positively about this quarantine for everybody out there that's watching this today?
I feel so thankful and grateful and lucky that I'm sitting here chatting with a friend in Vegas, enjoying the conversation in my nice house with my wife, who I actually really like. The more I spent with her, I'm like, wow, like you are my best friend. And I'm really, really thankful I fucking married you. Like, you know, when you're traveling, like, so I'm so lucky, and I'm doing stuff I love all day remotely. But I feel double that when I think that some people are sick and some people are losing all kinds of stuff, and it's hard for a lot of people. And then I feel a little guilty that it's so good, you know. Now that's just humans. That's a natural feeling, I think. And maybe I feel glad that I feel a little guilty, because I should. I think so. This is very simple, but if you have running water and food and shelter and safety, if you have those things, then you are at a state of life is good. Don't worry about all the other shit. Do you have that stuff? Okay, you do? Great. If you have that stuff now, instead of figuring out how to get food, or how to get safety, or how to get the basics, you already have them. You should be figuring out how to come out of this better than you went in. What that means to me is go on the internet and study something. Develop a skill you didn't have, or do some kind of virtual thing that you can do that has some value, or work out, or start running, or study a skill, or learn to play piano. But if you have the basics, and you don't have to spend a lot of your time and effort getting the building blocks of your life, spend your fucking time learning something, so that after this you have a new skill to bring to the world. And the world changes back in the direction of where people being out again. Well, now, and it's tough, and some of us don't have jobs, and some of us have all these extra challenges. Well, maybe you got a skill. That's, if it's meditation, maybe it makes your life, you've added meditation or yoga, makes your life better. You added working out, all of a sudden you're healthier. You added video editing, well, now you have a skill you can use. So if you have the basics, then you fucking figure it out, write yourself sort of a schedule for the day, and from 1 to 3, or from 1 to 120, learn something. Gain of values. Deploy the resource you have, time, against something, studying and learning or training and practice or something, so that you gain some benefit. And I know not everybody has food and shelter and safety. And if you don't have those things, you have to spend your time just having the basics to live. But if you do have those, you're lucky, and you have time and learn a skill.
See, guys, when I started this podcast, I only wanted positive people that had a message to spread. I wanted inspirational people that not only I thought was interesting, but I thought that people around the world would want to hear the inside story. And we've just given it to you right here with this man, Robin Black. Not only is he an inspiration in this industry, but he's one personally to me. Robin, I want to thank you very much for coming on my podcast today. I know it's our only 16th episode. Maybe I can get you for my 116th episode. How does that sound?
Yeah, man. Count me in anytime, brother. Like, circle back in a few weeks. I'd be glad to come on and chat with you anytime. Thanks for the kind words too. It means a lot to me. It really does. And I'm grateful for you having me on, and for you saying nice shit about me. Thank you.
All came from the heart. Ladies and gentlemen, and what happens here, Mr. Robin Black.
Enjoy the hostilities, my friends.
Hey guys, Marcus here. Today's episode was proudly sponsored by Team Guilty Clothing, Conquered Apparel, Rise Fight Gear, Molcata Clothing Wear. How could we forget Fit Guru Fight Retreats in Las Vegas? Of course, Wildcats for all your cannabis needs. And of course, Baller Balm for when your beard needs to be money. Today's episode was fueled by Proper 12, the finest, the tastiest liquid gold on the planet.